And we're now streaming, hopefully live. Oh, Zane, did you get an email with your bus times?
Yes,
Okay, so you are aware.
I'm aware.
Excellent. And your brother's aware.
No,
What?
he's not.
Text him right now.
No, not just.
I will tackle you.
He told me. He told me. Who was that? I forgot my binder.
Get a piece of paper. You just need a piece of paper. Okay, notebook should be out. Piece of paper out. Laptop's away. We've had a lot of video days, so today we're going to get through some content. I do apologize. There will be a lot of chance of discussion and questions. So do ask questions if you want to slow it down for discussion. What? Maybe a 5-minute break halfway through. Remind me halfway through. Okay? Okay. Everybody has their notes out. Put laptops away. Don't have them partially open so you can see the game. It's kind of I don't know. Whatever game's on.
I don't watch games.
Hockey game, Brawl Stars, whatever the game is.
No, I don't watch football.
I don't watch football either. I always get lost when I'm looking at it because the little white ball goes into the sky, and who can see that? They do that weird clap.
What?
Football.
That's
What do you mean that weird?
Oh, golf. I thought golf was the one where you, like, there's this black disc and they hit it really hard at the net and they, like, they're on ice.
That's hockey.
What's hockey? Terrible, terrible, terrible.
I think it's fun.
I did when I was a new house parent. That was obviously what I just said was a joke. But a couple of students came to ask me if they could watch the game at 3 a.m. And I'm like, there's no game that's important enough to watch at 3 a.m. What even is the World Cup?
No.
Apparently that was a shocking statement, and Mr. Gage spoke to me very nicely to explain the importance of the World Cup. Okay, this is just a quick note. Just because you're incompetent doesn't obviously mean that you're always incompetent. You are completely incompetent when you are asleep, but if someone ignored everything that you said just because once in a while you're asleep, you would be upset with them. So if someone is not permanently incompetent, we should still take in their views. They would still have the ability to direct their life. Even if they've had, I know someone who is taking care of their in-laws because both of their in-laws have developed a severe Parkinson's. But there are moments of lucidity where there are like days where they're back to their old self for whatever reason. And she uses those days to go and ask them and give them updates of what's going on, get what they would have wanted to happen, because she is now, it's so often that she now has all of, she's their proxy in all financial matters because of that. Now, permanent, if you're in a coma or you have something that has damaged your brain in such a way that you can't think properly, you need a permanent proxy decision maker. That would be like the person with Parkinson's disease. It could be temporary. You've just witnessed something or something has happened to you. You're in shock. It could only be in a particular time or area. I had a student in grade 12 biology, and she had a particular form of incompetence, and I was a very new teacher, so I said yes to this. We were doing a biology lab for Biology 12 in which we determined blood type. And it turns out she was terrified of needles. She managed to get a little bit of blood. She did the type, and then she was very excited because she said, great, now I don't have to go get my blood typed for it, because she was about to travel internationally, and apparently she had to know her blood type for that. And I said, you can't use a high school lab that you did with a tiny smear of blood and all the inaccuracies that go with that for your official documents. They won't accept that. You have to actually go get your blood typed. And she said, I'm terrified of needles. Mr. Neufeld, could you come up with me to the clinic and hold me down while they take my blood type? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, when they come in, I just want you to hold my arms, because I will scream and I will try to get away. And I'm like, this is a little weird. Are they okay with that? And they're like, oh yeah, I talked to them first, but I don't have any family here. They were from far away. I won't say where they're from in case you can guess who they are. And so I said, sure. And I came up with them. It was the needle, and the nurse walked into the room, and they're immediately, no, I changed my mind. And I went like, okay. And they went like, no, because the nurse laughed. When I say that, you have to keep holding my arms, because I don't have any control over what I'm going to say at that moment. And I'm like, okay, but you realize how weird this is? And she said yes. And so then I held her arms down, and then no matter what she said, I held them down while the nurse came in and drew some blood and left, and then afterwards she thanked me. So while she was incompetent, I was supposed to ignore what she said based on her instructions while she was competent. Now, looking back, I think I was in my first year as teacher or second. I think I should have involved maybe the house parents in that decision, because that's a kind of an odd thing to be doing. But she had a temporary incompetence, an incompetence based on place. If there's a needle in the room, she couldn't make a decision. We've had parents who have come in for parent-teacher interviews, and then we very, very carefully have to shield their view and get them out of the room because we had forgotten about the tarantula. We used to have a tarantula, and we had a nice little glass cage, and it would wander around. And some people are afraid of spiders, to the point that they cannot move or really make any decisions once they see a spider. This particular parent, we discovered, had a very severe form of arachnophobia. And so we had to work to get her out of the room so we could continue the parent-teacher interview, because once she saw the spider, everything was over. She couldn't think about anything else. She was in a type of shock. Someone with a variety of mental illness may be competent one day and ill the next. If someone has schizophrenia, you're going to want to talk to them, and they're going to want to make decisions when they're competent. And there will be times when they might be seeing things, and then they're incompetent. If we take advantage of them when they're incompetent, that is not exactly fair or ethical. But to take away their entire ability to make decisions would seem unfair, because they're competent much of the time. And irrationality with specific things. Questions, concerns? Quick note. Okay. This act, BC has, I think, the strongest laws in Canada that protect you and allow you to make your own medical decisions. And it deserves special mention since we're going over competence, because you are now all residents of the province of British Columbia while you're at the school. And you are afforded those rights no matter where you are from. If you step foot in a country, even if you're not a citizen of that country, you still get a host of rights. Just because you're a human being within that country. BC Infants Act. You are technically an infant. This is anyone 18 or under. At what age in the province of British Columbia are you an adult? 19. So in British Columbia, you can drink when you're 19, or purchase other substances, but below that time it's illegal. Federally, when are you an adult? 18. So provincially and federally, we have different laws. So if you are looking at any sort of federal statute, you're an adult at 18. If you're looking at any BC provincial law, you're an adult at 19, which means you can vote federally for the Prime Minister of Canada at 18 years old, and you wouldn't be allowed to vote for the Premier or drink while you're exercising your rights as an adult. I think they do that in BC, so there's at least one election you would not vote drunk in. BC protects you because it says if you're under 19, you can consent if you're competent. And it is independent of age. It says that you are competent if you understand the need for the medicine, you understand the benefits and the risks. But it has an important caveat. The doctor has to decide that you understand. And at that point, you do not need permission of your parent or guardian. There's a lot of things that are just assumed that you would understand. Any doctor would just assume it, because if you do understand and a doctor goes against your wishes, they can get in a bit of trouble. Birth control, treatments for STIs, things that maybe people would want to keep a secret from their parents, abortion, prenatal care, all of those things can be kept from your parents. If your parents are extremely not very understanding about, say, for example, the Rainbow Mafia, and you are undergoing gender dysphoria, and you need treatment, and when you want to see health care, that can all be kept from your parents, because the idea is that you can understand it. You can make decisions about your own health care. The doctor's providing the knowledge. So the doctor's not going to provide you with options that are unsafe or that go against medical advice. And at that point, if you are competent, you should be allowed to make your own decisions. Yeah.
Does getting transgender, like gender-changing surgeries, go against like medical advice for like ultimate healthiness of the body?
No. Well, it depends. Like, let's say you're 5 years old and you're like, you were male at birth, and then you wake up one day and you're 5, and you're like, I'm a girl. What at that point would a doctor do? The parents might take them into a doctor, and they're like, and he says, well, yeah, they might be transgender, but it could also be like, well, Kirk, when he was about 5 years old, woke up one day and just decided he was a little old lady. I don't know why, but he was confident he was. Lasted about 2 days. And he saw a show or something, and then it went away. So a doctor at that side will be like, well, they're 5. If they really want to, like, who cares if they wear a dress or change their name? We'll just see how that fits. And then if it doesn't fit, they'll just forget. But if it's persistent and ongoing, then that would be persistent and ongoing. So if it's the same at 6, 7, 8, 9, treatments may change. And then in adolescence, the process would be, okay, you're about to go into puberty. And puberty is going to make a lot of changes to your body. And if you are truly suffering from gender dysphoria, and by now, this time we've had a record. You've seen like doctors and psychiatric care counselors to go through this. So we know quite a bit about you. Rather than doing gender reassignment surgery, we may just delay it. These are drugs that are really quite safe. They were initially used, let's say that you had cancer, and you had a form of cancer that, say, feeds off of estrogen or testosterone. While they're treating the cancer, they would block the estrogen and testosterone so you wouldn't go through puberty until the cancer was cured, and then they would stop, and then you'd go through the normal puberty. So they knew a lot about this, and they can just delay puberty for a few years.
But doesn't your brain like almost like develop when you're 21? So
The amygdala does, yeah.
so if you like make any decision before then, if it's like life altering, like changing your gender, can that be considered you're not perfectly sane to make that decision responsibly?
Well, number one, you're not making it in the absence of a doctor. Like, you can't just walk into a clinic and say, I'd like different parts now, please. So some things are like that, but your brain doesn't develop that. Your brain develops the sense of who you are much earlier. So now they've got good data on that. You don't need to wait till you're 21. In fact, waiting until you go through surgery might make things a lot worse. Right? Like you have to consent to cancer treatment. You have to consent to a lot of things. Waiting until you can, chemotherapy would do radical changes to your body. We wouldn't wait for that if you're having experiences now that would potentially harm you. One of the main risks with transgender youth is mental health and suicide. The regret rate for transgender surgery in adolescence is less than that of plastic surgery. It's really low. There is a rate where people have regretted it, but it's lower, much lower than the suicide rate if we don't do anything. So in a balance of risks, surgery is often the better option. Now, let's say we did take that small chance and they did get the surgery and now they regret it. Well, we know how to deal with that. That is still trans, just the other way. You've now, in a gender, you undo the surgery or have take different hormones and reverse as much as you can. A lot of this, sorry, I'm not going through historical because this has a Canadian context I found out about last year. The idea that you don't need surgery, you can just learn how to be whichever gender is due to a Canadian psychologist. Due to a botched circumcision, so if you don't know what a circumcision is, they take the male organ and they snip off some skin. And they accidentally snipped off the whole penis. It's a baby.
How do you do that?
Snip.
They just
They just cut it off.
Just
It was
How
bad.
do you miss
It did not go well. Well, and if you think, is this something that happens often? No. But if there's 1 million surgeries in a year or across the world, a 1 in a million accident's going to happen every year.
Can you hold it?
Well, there's pee can still come out. You just don't have the length. Okay. Moving on from that. So now the parents have a male at birth, and the doctor says, well, because sometimes children are born with both genitalia. So they have, okay, we're getting a bit into biology 12, but this is not a secret. You can be what's called intersex. You may have testes, but you may also have an organ that functions much similar to a penis, and you also have a vulva and all the other things. So you have kind of both. And what they used to do is they would just ask the parents, what do you want? Pick one. We'll surgically alter them to be whichever gender you pick, because they've got all the stuff. Well, in this particular case, it was cut off. What they did, it's a mature topic, so if you have a question, put up your hand. And what they did to this male at birth is the doctor said, well, okay, you could, if you wanted to, raise a little girl instead of a little boy. And it's irrelevant. We've already done half the surgery already. So they did. They completed it, and they did a gender surgery on that baby. So the baby grew up, treated as a girl, dressed as a girl, named as a girl, went to school as a girl, all things a girl. And as soon as they got 6, 7, 8 years old, they realized no one's telling them they're a boy. They realized, I'm a boy. But they got all the classic symptoms that we now recognize as being transgender. They were extremely depressed. They thought about suicide all the time. They didn't like their name. They wanted to change their name. They wanted to play with different toys. They wanted to change their dress. All those classic symptoms. The Canadian psychologist who was studying this case, his study reported the opposite. He would do interviews and he would say, they're doing fine, they're doing really well, look at how successful it is. And the identity of this person was kept a secret. He published this, the world went, look at this going really well. Because from the psychologist reports, look, you can change gender just by telling someone that they're different and dressing them in the right way. It doesn't matter. And so everybody thought this is where gender re-education camps came from. If your child thinks you're a different gender, just send them to a camp. We will program them to be another one. Because you can just change that. This study says you can. Eventually, the secrecy and the identity of this person was found out, and they found out all of everything he reported was wrong. The name, I think, was it Michael Michel? I'd have to go back and double check. Eventually, he did commit suicide. I can't remember how old he got, but not a good case. We now know that it's very difficult to change the brain of what it is insists it is. And so now the recommendations are we don't want to get that far. You want to treat it as early as possible. But the treatment is often just like, yeah, sure, you can wear different clothes and be called by a different name and see how it goes. We don't do gender reassignment surgery until we're very, very sure of that. And that's gone through doctors and everything. But if you have parents who don't believe in it, you are allowed to go and request, just like you do for birth control. But you can't walk on and say, like, I'm trans, I want this, please give it to me right now. The doctor's going to want to exercise their knowledge and interview you and care for you for a while and just see how things go. And sometimes before even before you get to anything as extreme as surgery, you would just take hormones. So let's say you are feeling like you're more male than you are female, like in the case of this poor boy. He grows up as a girl. He says, I think I'm not a girl. If he'd actually gotten treatment, they said, well, we could start you on testosterone, and then you'll grow a beard. None of your genitalia will change, but your face will change. And you might feel more of yourself. And some people just stop there. They just go, actually, this is enough. This makes me feel more like me. People are calling me by the right name. I don't need any surgery. I don't want anything, because that contains inherent risk. So yeah, children are allowed. This is, of course, obviously, I'm presenting this very medically. From a parent point of view, this is hugely controversial because now you're doing things to their children without necessarily the permission. But this has always been the case in BC. If you are female, or if you're a female, if you have a uterus and you get pregnant, you can go to a doctor and you can ask them not to tell your parents, and they're not allowed to tell your parents. Because if you are old enough to be pregnant, you are probably competent, and you went for medical help, you're competent enough to understand the medicine, the benefits, the risk, and everything else that they're going to tell you. Children as young as 12, 11, 10 have been decided to be competent. But if you're 14, 15, 16, 17, absolutely. Health center here has to deal with that all the time. Student goes in, I am, very depressed. I have suicidal thoughts. Now, if it gets to the point suicidal thoughts, that is a life or death. They may be able to say, you're not understanding everything. We have to tell your parents because we have to get you help. But if you're just like, I think I have syphilis because I was with someone from Shawnigan. Everybody from Shawnigan obviously has syphilis. Then you just get the penicillin and you get it cured and you do that. And they don't ever have to keep. Even things like birth control can be added to your bill in a way that doesn't say that it's birth control, because they do have to keep it a secret, but your parents still have to get the bill because they have the insurance. And so there's ways around that as well to protect your privacy. Did that answer your question? The trans one is very, very recent, last 5 years. 10 years. When I first started researching it, I went back to a textbook that I had, a medical textbook that was written in the 1950s, because I wanted to see how the advice had changed from the 50s to now, and I found out the advice hasn't changed. They've known this since the 50s. It's taken this long to hit common culture. But yeah, nobody walks in and just says it. The doctor still has to make the medical decision, and then you can choose it if it's a correct option. There's no set age limit. Theoretically, you could be like 3 years old. You're some 3-year-old genius, and you're like, I understand everything. I don't think it's ever been done, but possible. Applies to birth control, abortion, mental health problems, sexually transmitted infections, alcohol and drug addiction. If you're like, the heroin I got from Whittle House during the last open house, been a little too much for me. I can't get my homework done due to the amount of heroin I'm doing. You can go and get health care and say, I don't want anybody to know, I just want treatment. Now that being said, what might happen if you go to your family doctor? They might tell your parents. Are they ethically allowed to?
No.
No. Do you have money to sue them?
No.
No. So go to a doctor that your parents don't know. There's lots of clinics, and they don't have that personal relationship possibly with your parents. The health center has parents who pay fees. There may be things where they are, having been in a lot of decisions, they can make a lot of things private. But if they are genuinely concerned for your immediate health, that is something that can always go to your parents. Drug addictions, depending on what it is, could, I mean, if you're addicted to heroin, Whittle House. A doctor cannot talk to parents about a child's care without that child's permission. If you were a doctor, how would you make sure that wasn't a problem? Because you want to tell the parent. Yep.
Have the parents present in the room.
Have the parents present in the room. If they're there and they're telling the child, the parent is hearing. So now the child has clearly consented to the parents being here. But you're allowed to ask your parents to leave and say, I'd like to talk to the doctor by myself. That might be odd. There might be social fallout with your parents, but the doctor should allow that. I actually, as a parent, I have tried to insist, like, okay, we're at the doctor's appointment. They've told us all the things. Kirk has a metabolic disorder, so like there's lots of doctor's appointments there. And I'm like, I'm going to leave the room now so that you can talk to the doctor about anything you need to privately. Because the idea behind that is, what if one of them didn't want to tell me something? And that meant they didn't get medical care. That'd be much, much worse than me just knowing. So I'll leave and I'll let you. And so far, they refuse to let me leave. They're like, no, that's weird. You have to stay. I'm like, no. A good parent should allow time with the doctor, if they thought of this, with the child on their own, so they can just get used to that and start bringing up stuff that even if they have questions about. Because sometimes sex education is very, very bad. And they have questions they cannot ask in any other way. It does have to be in the child's best interest. So the doctor can't be making a decision that is clearly in the child's best interest. So oftentimes a child can refuse treatment because they understand all the decisions but if the child insists on a treatment that's not warranted, to go back to your example, the child walks in and is like, I want gender reassignment surgery. The doctor's going to be, no, that's not in your best interest right now. Here's what we can do. We could I sign you up with a counselor, or we might trial this, different name for a little while, give them a test of gender dysphoria. We may try you on some different medications. Maybe this is actually something else, and wait until we can see that. The U.S. is very different. So here in BC, you have a ton of rights. You can refuse treatment. You can go get treatment. The U.S. is much, much more difficult. If you cross that border, they have firmly established that the state is allowed to intervene to save a child. So whereas you could refuse treatment, in the U.S., they will pick you up, take you to the hospital, and force you to have the treatment if it's in your best interest. No, don't play that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Enjoy your break. So, for example, if you are a Jehovah's Witness, which is one of those things that came up in our earlier case about culminants, Jehovah's Witnesses often have a belief that you cannot take blood products because it's equivalent to eating blood, which would affect their eternal soul. So they will refuse blood treatments. What if a child who is underage refuses blood treatment and they will die without it? In BC, it may be possible to refuse it. Now, if the doctor decides it's not in their best interests, like they're going to die, I think maybe they're too influenced by their parents in this religion, maybe they could get the courts to do it. It's not as cut and dry. But in the U.S., it's absolutely, the court would step in, they have to have the transfusion, the parents are not allowed to make any other decision. Boom. We had a similar case in Canada, the octet mom. She had 8 babies, and everybody in BC was like, wow, that's amazing, 8 babies, celebrate. And then a week later, it was like, babies aren't doing so well. They need transfusions, and it hit the news because mom was refusing to let them go back to the hospital for transfusions. She believed in a religion that didn't allow blood transfusions. So eventually the BC courts actually quickly decided they took all the babies away, they gave them the transfusions, and then they gave them back. Still the mom's babies. And luckily, we also know that if you're a Jehovah's Witness in particular, if you are forced to take blood against your will, it doesn't count. So, we know they'll be okay. But and the babies weren't old enough to object, so literal babies. But if they were 13, 14, not entirely sure we would have done that. Hold it, I'm just talking and moving on. Anybody still writing? I think these are mostly examples. You don't have to look at that and go, oh my God, you're not going to write that much. You can be overruled as a child if you say I don't or do want the treatment, but it goes to court at that point. How old, you might know, because the law recently changed. How old do you have to be to get a tattoo in the province of British Columbia? 16.
But
So,
if you like
that's-
parental permission, can you get it earlier?
Yeah.
can you get a permit?
I do
Yeah.
in Rogers House. He says like him and his mom go.
Yeah. I mean, it's a permanent change to your body.
If you're past 16, you can get it.
It's not quite medical.
Oh.
Yeah.
And then if
No,
you're
but like,
19, you can get it. By yourself.
Okay. So 16 by yourself?
No, 16 parental permission, I think.
Oh, okay.
And
No?
19 by
Get-
yourself.
My friend got one the other day and she's 15.
What?
With parental consent.
Was it that weird place in Victoria with a frog in the window?
No.
Because as far as I know, they give it to anybody that walks in. Well, it's all
She
the
didn't,
people in
like, I
there.
don't know about how long.
I only know about it because every time we go to UVic and somebody gets a
she's in
tattoo, they should.
Ontario, so-
Oh, okay, it's completely
Ontario.
different. Yeah, they might have different rules too. Not octuplets; they were sextuplets. It's written in Leviticus. This is the actual one that comes up with Jehovah's Witnesses. You don't have to write any of this down, just because it comes up and it's in our legal system so often. Because this is the largest religious group I think that regularly refuses treatment. There are other ones. Have you heard of Christian Scientists? A little bit. They refuse many, many more medical interventions to the point I don't even think they take Tylenol or ibuprofen. As for any man who eats any sort of blood, I shall certainly set my face against the soul that is eating the blood, and I shall indeed cut him off from among his people. So that's in the book of Leviticus. If you are of a Christian background, you've never read that, go back and read that. Because that is there, and Jehovah's Witness looked at that and said, that seems fairly clear that we shouldn't have blood transfusions. So that's the rational underpinning. Basic assumptions of medical ethics did support the hospital's decisions. Transfusion was the only option in order to save them, and they had a duty to inform the child protection workers, and if the parents refused therapy, they were going to take them away. And the key fact here is that children are babies, and so they cannot consent or not consent in any way at all, so that makes it much easier to step in. They're not mature minors. Ike Kenneth Kluge was my professor at the University of Victoria. He keeps getting quoted because he advises people all over the world, which is weird. a Jehovah's Witness nowadays who accepts blood is to have disassociated himself from the congregation. However, nobody investigates. So if we are maintaining medical privacy, nobody should be able to be punished for it. And in 2000, the directive was that a member, for this to be true, that they would have disassociated from it. They have to do so willfully and without regret. So if they're forced to, then they're fine. And if they really regret it afterwards, then technically they're also fine. So it's improving a little bit. Yes?
Is Jehovah's Witness, is that like Scientology?
No, they're
What is it?
very different. Jehovah's Witness is a form of
That means being life down to earth.
a form of Christianity. Is anybody here a Scientologist? Zane? I'm pretty sure I knew.
What is that?
What, okay,
Zane, are you genuinely
No.
okay, don't do that.
Sorry.
If how many of you? The only thing you know about Scientology you heard on South Park.
I know it because there's a, I think,
That has something to do with
not
dinosaurs.
South Park, but there's a famous person that I.
Tom Cruise.
There's a lot of famous people.
I've seen
Um,
TikToks on it.
It's very popular in actors and actresses. They're all actors now.
Oh, yeah, isn't Tom
Um,
Cruise a Scientologist?
Tom Cruise is a Scientologist.
I actually visited the Scientology building when I was in LA, and yeah, so I was just like going around, just like exploring like Hollywood. I tried to go in, but then I was kicked out by like some weird, like old, like balding guy with like a blue T-shirt, and that's my only experience with like
Okay.
actual Scientology.
Interesting. Not as informative as I would have hoped. Scientology was invented or discovered, you look at, by a science fiction writer known as L. Ron Hubbard. Robert A. Heinlein, Larry Niven, other science fiction writers have quoted L. Ron Hubbard as saying, you know what? If you want to make a lot of money, you should invent a religion. And then later, he did. That doesn't say whether or not it's true or not, but it is where he was going. Ultimately, they believe that you have been here before. Your soul constantly gets regenerated into different people. There was a kidnapping by space aliens a long time ago, and that started this process, and you're carrying a lot of baggage along with your soul. They also believe psychiatrists and psychiatry is fundamentally evil, and they are actively trying to kill you. So they put out a lot of publications against that, which means a lot of mental health problems. So if you were confusing the two, it might be because Scientology is often against mental health treatment. They think psychiatry is thoroughly messed up. And so the similar things will apply there.
Don't you also have to like pay for like levels?
They have a weird Dungeons and Dragons type system, in which I shouldn't say weird, sorry. They have a system, and in which you take courses, and you pay for the courses.
Pyramid scheme.
And you can't advance within the church unless you pay for the courses. Now the
Yeah.
first one's free, so I've done the first one. I was at the P&E and I walked by and they had a little tent and they're like, "Hey, want to take a free thing?" And I'm like, "Sure." And I sat down and I answered a bunch of questions, and then they told me how messed up I was and all the mental problems I had, and maybe I should pay to take some real courses and to meet them at this building. And when I looked up the building, that building was the Scientology church or building. So yeah, they want to get you into, and they have like a little machine that when you touch it, it will tell you how messed up your soul is, and it will have a little needle that moves. Yeah.
How is it like? How do you?
Is it pyramid scheme?
Magnetic?
Scam.
I mean,
Definitely is.
the needle moves. I
Fortnite.
don't know. Yes.
And that reminds me, one thing that I did see in the Scientology building before I got kicked out was a suspicious amount of donation, like boxes or whatever, or like jars. Just
They are not recognized as a religion in Germany because they are considered a business. They were not recognized as a religion in the U.S. for a very long time until they sued the IRS almost into oblivion, and then finally they were recognized. One of the things they're known for is that they are very active in a legal process. So if you leave Scientology, you're not just shunned. You have signed contracts about what you will and will not reveal, and they are more than happy to go after you if you break the contract. Yeah.
Wait, so like, do you have to like pay to like finish the level? Like keep
Oh,
going up,
yeah,
or,
yeah, yeah. But eventually, you can take the courses for free as long as you sign a billion-year contract
Oh,
and join the Sea Org.
Can we-
It's a sub-organization. So what you do is you pledge your soul, because your souls get recycled. So you pledge it for a billion years, and then you don't have to pay for the courses anymore. They're free. But you now work for them.
How much
Also,
are the courses?
and
also
you can't
for free.
escape.
Well, you could run away,
They find.
but
They find.
they
I
do.
mean, if they could like. sue
They
the
do
IRS.
have their own jails, there and then there.
So what happens if you go there and say my old soul, like stay for a contract?
Yeah, I haven't heard of them ever not taking money from someone.
Wait, isn't it,
So
is,
could
is,
you just anyone go there and say like, oh yeah, like I'm not here to go. my
Oh,
soul-
they make a lot of, I don't think they would accept that. Hugo?
Wouldn't they like that could also be scam because like they could like
No,
just
no,
walk you out.
no. Even though no one from here said their side, I don't want to immediately say, if I started calling any particular religion a scam,
No, like I understand that,
every set of beliefs has something weird.
but how do you know what your past self did? Like,
Yeah,
maybe
good.
they signed a contract, maybe they didn't.
I don't know. It's a problem.
is it possible to hold people in your own prisons?
Pardon?
Is it possible to hold people in your own prisons legally?
Like legally, yeah.
Oh, probably not. But if, you've
Or
been sworn,
maybe in the contract, like, could you have that in your contract? And
I mean,
Can
they
you
are.
consent to, like illegal things?
I encourage anybody, after this, if they want to know more, to just type in legal issues, Scientology, Scientology, legal, they're just very good at it. They have tried to get into a little trouble before, and then the prosecutors and people investigating themselves have found themselves subject to a variety of things. Some other examples. I like seeing if this updates at all.
No, please, no. Just like you. I was like, I don't know. But she's supposed to speak out. Never speak to me.
Because this question does regularly come up, like what about, can kids change their gender? What is that about? How do you do it? BC Children's Hospital has a whole thing on gender resources, right from name change forms, binders, consent forms for blockers and hormones and other such things, so you can learn about it before you go there. They've got a family library, and this is all from the BC Children's Hospital, so it is a good source with medical doctors. If you know somebody who is feeling a bit of gender dysphoria, and they want to start with something like binders, please ensure and recommend that they do so properly and they look at these sites, because you can actually run into health problems. Do you know what a binder is? Hands up if you know. A binder is something you wear to decrease the size of your breasts so that you look more male-like. But if you exercise while you're in those and it is too tight, you can damage your lungs over time because you can't breathe properly. And so it's important to have ones that are proper for exercise and everything else. These are the legal cases that have established this in Canadian, in particular, well, BC law, 1986. 16-year-old sought an abortion, was required by law at the time. They sought approval from a statutory committee. The parents of the doctor sued the doctor and said, you have to stop. And the parents argued that the girl hadn't been given informed consent, and if the doctor went ahead with it, they would be guilty of assault. The doctor didn't even bother defending it. He was like, fine. But the young woman, apparently, amazing person that she is, got her own lawyer and intervened in the course on behalf of the doctor and said, no, this is my decision. And the court obviously found that she did have a sufficient understanding. Because if you have enough understanding to hire a lawyer and make legal arguments, you probably know what's going on. And say, this established that people that have sufficient intelligence and understanding have the capacity to consent to their own treatment. Parents are not allowed to intervene. BH was 16 and a half years old, member of the Jehovah's Witness faith. When she was diagnosed with leukemia, she required blood transfusions, but she and her family refused them. Eventually, the father gave consent, but she said no, and the doctors would not treat in the face of her refusal. Child welfare in Alberta sought apprehension and a treatment order that was granted by the court. She was a mature minor in that she was intelligent and capable, but the judge in that point interviewed her and thought she's a little too sheltered. She has not reached a point where she could even question what she was to be taught, so not a mature minor. She then appealed. Judge considered that she was a mature minor, but stated that the Welfare Act in Alberta clearly states that if she is in need of protective services, the law applied. The judge said that as she was a mature minor, her opinions about the proposed course of treatment must be considered, but not necessarily followed. The court considered this might be overriding her right to religion, but this was justified for her welfare. So in this case, she got the transfusion and ordered transfusion. Also, Alberta, not BC. BC's laws are a little stronger, or they are now. 15-year-old Jehovah's Witness required chemotherapy to treat cancer, and blood transfusion would be necessary. Where are we now? Newfoundland. Medical evidence, intensive chemotherapy could result in 10 to 40% chance of inhibiting the progress of the disease. Treating physician determined he was a mature minor. And they apprehended the boy. The director of the hospital did to say, no, you gotta have a transfusion, despite the fact the doctor wasn't gonna do it. Court found that he was a mature minor with firm religious convictions and was not a child in need of protection. So determined to be mature enough to make his own treatment, and since the physician was like, I will try it without the transfusion, then we don't need to do it. And in that particular case, the physician was like, okay, it's better if they get a transfusion, but I can try it without it. And the court was like, okay, he really doesn't want it. So this case, forced transfusion, this case went along with the child. Transgender court upheld that they had validly consented to the treatment under the Infants Act. They recognized their consent as valid and noted that delaying the treatment posed a risk to the child. They had previously suffered due to gender dysphoria. In this particular case, I believe it was one parent who objected, if I'm remembering it correctly. And the court was like, they consented. It's the best interest of the child, that it almost makes it a no-brainer. When we, oh God, that one. Let's get that link going. There's other examples. Now, as you can understand, parents don't like this law very much. Dr. Bonnie Henry, who, believe in Dr. Bonnie Henry, saved our province during COVID. BC was one of the best provinces in Canada in terms of our response to COVID and our treatment of it, and in terms of number of cases. Bonnie Henry, who was in charge at the time, was in Toronto writing a dissertation on the potential for a global pandemic when SARS was happening in Toronto, and had firsthand experience, and then wrote the book on how you should respond to a global pandemic. When she was done, she eventually became the head of BC, and so when the global pandemic actually happened, she was here and not in Toronto. So we were very lucky to have her. This is Kids First Parent Association of Canada, and they're petitioning and continue to petition Dr. Bonnie Henry to repeal the Infants Act. They would prefer that a doctor's decision, all information must be relayed to parents. Parents, if the parents are not informed, then informed consent has not happened, and to remove all of those protections. So it is something that we could lose in the future. if the courts change. So, some examples. It's not always cut and dry, but they carefully weigh it in each case. That is enough on competence, because very next then is proxy. Because if you have someone who's incompetent, you need a proxy. Yes. You have a 5-minute break? Yes. And then, because that'll be useful, don't go too far. I need to take attendance and then put you into groups for the next part.
When's class then?
What's today?
Thursday.
45.
Second block? Yeah, 45.
Have you? They're so funny.
Science analytics, attendance. Anish, here. Annabelle, not here. Anahad. Archie.
Yeah.
Ava's gone. No. Ben. Brandon.
Yeah.
Casey.
Here.
Clara. Felix.
Yeah.
Hugo.
Here.
Kate Martin. Kate Watt.
Yeah.
Kieran Van Fleet is not here. Lila.
Yeah.
Lily.
Yeah.
Lisa.
Yep.
Parker.
Yeah.
Timmy. Violet.
Yeah.
William K. William Lee.
He's on break.
He's gone. Zane.
Yeah.
Zoe. Okay. One, two, three, four. I think in this big one, 5 groups. 5 groups might be better.
I saw that. It was embarrassing.
Okay, that is 5 minutes. Put down the Brawl Stars. And find your group. William K. You can join any group you like. Find your people and find a spot on the board because I'm going to want to see a list. Find your people. Okay, get a pen or something so you can write things down. I'm going to copy it.
Oh, sorry.
Everybody in the groups. On the board, please come up with a group name. And then I want you as a group to determine who you would trust to be your proxy. Now, by statute law, who is your current proxy? The parents. You can still put that down, but you can make it specific. Would you trust your dad or your mom? An older sibling, uncle, aunt, random person, health center, list of people. I want a list, and if they're not available, who would be next in line? I want at least 5 people as your proxies, in order of importance. Who, if you were to designate who they were, what is your group doing? Who's number 1? Who's number 2? Who's number 3? Who's number 4? Who's number 5?
Would you want to be my friend?
Okay?
Yeah.
So you do it as a group.
What's up?
No, your group is going to come up with. Yeah.
I'm the one case.
But you may designate, say you're making a law, and your group decides that, I don't know, your youngest aunt. Your group decides, and it'll be a different person for all of you, but it will always be the youngest aunt. So you know, yeah, so, I mean, unless you all agree, like, you know, Mr. Sullivan is our proxy, then you could all agree on a specific person if you wanted. Yeah.
Okay, number 1. My mom.
No, that's great.
How many groups have we got?
No, I would not trust my sister.
I know, we would just.
You have to say specifically though. So do
Three.
split parents.
Brother.
Okay.
Edison. Split parents. So then we get 2 answers. 1 and 2. Just change the.
Well, because one time I said something to someone, I was like, oh, and your dad's the good. And they're like, I don't have that.
It's Batman.
So,
Why would I have a
parents?
I can
Wait, what parents?
bro? Okay, sibling.
Tummy ache.
I trust my dad more.
That's just like, what's your parents'
Okay, what's your the secret what society?
Slumgoid.
Slungoid.
Just put for 2. Okay.
I'll choose my uncle.
Over Casey's friend.
Why am I not number 1? I'm very excited right now.
I feel like you said one, but
You're just the proxy.
Casey, what
Okay.
if your dad like maybe you are?
Is that how I spell Casey?
I think people.
I wouldn't trust me. That's weird. Let's end the conversation.
You
got a sister? Let's end.
No, just no discussion between the groups. You're coming up with your own list. You just have to be consistent within your group. You're the international group.
My sister would sell me for No, she's
No name. And we are group ethic.
both of my grandparents like Jeff Collins.
It's
Oh,
wild.
good.
Morning ones.
Mine's just the mornings, like,
Yeah, okay.
But
well,
yeah, Casey number 5. Yeah.
yeah. No, I have to be number one.
No.
You say you wouldn't trust Casey going to or Greg
No.
number one.
True though. No.
Oh.
Sorry.
I don't know why I have to be scared.
Barack Obama.
What? That'd be like family doctor.
Oh yeah,
That
grandparents.
we all like.
Yeah, you're number one like
No.
parent.
They're always
Oh,
meeting.
yeah.
What is that? What are
I'm sorry, that's
That's
We got 5, we got 4.
Okay, for like grandparents.
Wait, how about like a hand?
You guys need to work faster. You only got 2. You've got
Over your grandparents.
4.
Basically, that's the most I say that.
Yeah, me too.
Oh no, you can't put me.
Yeah.
This you're incompetent. Whatever this is,
Casey's
you're not in it.
Raise that right now.
So you need
Hey,
you
these
need
are number
5.
fives. You're in there.
Hey, Casey's mine.
Nuh-uh.
No, you can't argue with other groups.
That's it.
Hold on.
0.5.
Yeah, come on, guys.
We're not. Casey's not even your proxy. He's just your Waffle House.
Come on, come on. We need 3 more here.
I get it's really down.
Oh, seriously?
I will start writing yours.
I trust my nephew though to make decisions.
So you guys have mom first. Mom, dad.
Yes.
Casey, you're my favorite.
Julius Caesar.
What class is
No,
this
but
then?
like we're on the 5th proxy.
No, but I need a serious list. I need to cut it off at 5.
He's tasting hot.
You are the.
He said we're gonna cut it off at 5.
No, we know.
Okay.
I mean,
What's the first? Does that order matter? Father than mother?
Not really.
Not really.
Whatever one's like.
So just parents.
I would trust the Waffle House employees with my
Yeah,
life.
finally what? Okay, switch that.
Zane?
Yeah.
Does that order matter? You had father before mother, or is it just?
No, it doesn't matter. We're just like, oh,
Matson.
No, it's therapist.
Therapist?
Yes,
Yeah.
it was changed.
And we got siblings, grandparents, and Casey.
Get rid of Casey,
No, don't.
No.
Siblings.
Siblings.
I'm actually scared. I feel like we're gonna actually tell Mason to make some decisions for me and I can't have
Casey
that.
does not
Yeah,
have
that's
to
the usually binding document.
Oh, why?
I think I have control over everyone.
Casey,
Casey.
it's not my first. It's
I'm not,
for my first.
like, even if he's normal, Casey's still gonna make the decision.
Yeah,
The proxies
Oh,
have.
this is like 24/7 my post.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, facts.
Dad, mom.
How do you feel about your entire
It's
life?
gonna happen.
Aunt, was that aunt slash uncle?
And plus uncle.
I wanna see you sit.
And then sibling, and then Casey.
Is Luke really not number one for you?
Luke is not making my medical decisions
Why
for
don't we
me.
just make it
Thank
big
you so
dogs?
much.
It's a great idea. What do you mean?
Just put a big
No.
dog next to the case.
Yes, Luke Anders.
And
Can you put
Yeah.
the family dog?
international. Who's your number one there? Dad, then mom.
Well, our 0.5 is Casey.
Actually, I think I'm first on that one.
There is a 0.5. Older sibling.
One the Dune said it's Dooning time, and then the Dune.
Except
Yeah,
for
she's-
ours.
She's not an 8.
Oh, no.
Older sibling.
Or like aunt or uncle.
Is it aunt or uncle? Just aunt. Does it matter in your group? Aunt? Aunt. Clearly the aunt. Nobody trusts the creepy uncle. And then family doctor.
I was gonna put that on there, like,
Wait, can I change my uncle to Casey?
No, not anymore. Too late. Who's no name? There we go. We got
I'm
parents.
the back one. Yeah.
Oh.
It sounds like it.
Oh, sorry.
And then we have grandparents.
If brain works.
Started from the beginning, it sounds like Chloe's.
Say, is that Berser?
I've never been like happy.
Brain. And then uncle aunt.
Oh, I don't like that.
Well, like,
Wait, no, I need to go eat something.
oh yeah.
Oh, can you not do
Other leg.
mom
I
over dad?
What are you Johnny saying?
Older sibling. And then Casey.
Did you just say me?
What? Is it a bird?
Okay, if I get your attention.
Would you trust
What about our teacher?
But nobody put that. I'm very disappointed in all of you. Could have been Mr. Novella. Now, to the proxies in the international group, ignoring the Casey from the international group. Why dad before mom?
Are you asking? Who are you asking?
I'm asking proxies in international. Why dad before mom?
Because I don't know.
Dad.
I just kind of trust my dad more.
I would say my dad makes more rational. Like,
More rational. Mom's gonna be a little too worried because you're ill.
My dad was
Yeah.
like,
Actually,
man in the house type me. He's like,
So dad might be a little bit more rational about it. Similar.
my dad pays the bills.
Any sense that mom might do what they think is best and dad would do what you want?
Robert.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, and then mom. Mom still knows you. Very similar. We got aunt, uncle though before older sibling. I like they just say sibling. So like if you got a 4-year-old sibling, you know, you're toast. And then Casey, I am curious about the number of people that put Casey. Casey, please give a hand for Casey. Apparently, if anybody gets into an accident, except for group ethic, they're calling you at some point. Why, Casey?
He's a cool guy.
we got Casey as our number 6.
There's lots of cool guys.
oh yeah.
He's the coolest.
Not as cool as Casey.
Big dog.
So, is there anything about his decision-making process that you trust?
He just.
Oh.
I just trust him.
Like
Casey.
you are literally trusting him with your life.
Facts. So we just hope it doesn't get down there.
We just hope we. Well, someone put him first. So, why first?
Because since I met Casey, I profoundly trust him in my life. So yeah.
Well
That's
done,
really
Casey.
cute.
Well done. What do you notice about all of the lists?
Almost
Your parents are on top.
Your parents are on top,
And it's also
and then it's other relatives that you may have.
Yeah.
Now, there's one on here that's that's missing. That is the number one proxy, but it's not yours because you don't have one yet. If you do, it'd be weird. Yeah,
Spouse.
a spouse. So spouse would precede parents, but with parent permission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you act?
Yeah.
Pardon?
Your parents.
And there's no kids in here. I'm assuming none of you have kids yet. But later on, you might put your kids on there
Get on.
if you trust them. Now, to give a sense of the list, when we come up, what we have legally is very similar to what we've done here. Your parents would probably be first, then they'd go to other people. I do like these interesting ones that reflect individual choices that particularly people may have. So a therapist you might rank higher. Some people rank their siblings, would know them more than their grandparents. Now, these are groups of years past, so you can see that they've made similar decisions. We got parents, siblings. Friends didn't come up with ours. Some people put up house parents before their grandparents. And they did a little bit of like, why mom before dad? And in this particular group, they said, well, mom's actually really close. Mom's in Vancouver, but our dads are all actually really far away, so we don't trust them. They don't know what we're doing. Whereas one group made the same thing, but the opposite, what the dad group did, they say, our moms are really competent people. They're like doctors. Our dad doesn't know what he's doing in a crisis. Everybody in the group was like, dad's crazy. Don't trust dad first. Similar, moms, dads, aunts, uncles, anything on in here. No, Swiss was a particular student. Well, they called him Swiss because he was Swiss. Dad, mom, grandparents, some friends, house parent, mom, dad, family, doctor. Doctors come up once in a while if you feel they know you well enough. Not common and often not number one. Number two there, I like cousin. Jacob's dad. Everybody trusts Jacob's dad. Yeah. Anyone new in this one? I got on this one, Mr. Neufeld. Thank you. They got the highest mark ever. Mr. Neufeld also was over there. Mom, dad, aunt, nothing. Crever was a particular student.
Nicki Minaj.
Alex Riddenar. Now we're going way back now. And mom, dad. Next immediate family. Nurse Decker once made the list. Woo. I'm trying to scroll this one down. Nothing different on this one. Nothing too different on this one. Oh, here apparently I got really organized at the table. Godparents. Some of you may have different types of relations. Godparents are picked in some for one of these reasons. They are expected to know you well and give you advice that when you can't go to your parents. And so that might be some.
Wait, isn't that what that's for?
Pardon?
Isn't that what that's for?
Yeah. Well, they're not legally in the list. They may be, because godparents don't have to be related to you. They can just be people that you're. So if you wanted to, for all the ones that are odd, you would have to pick them. And if you really wanted your dad before your mom or your mom before your dad, you would have to specify in some sort of will, because law is not going to make that kind of fine grain. This was a group that I did question because they put down spouse, even though they didn't have one at all. Now, the first question though was, why wouldn't we need proxies? Why not always just make the decision in favor of life? And then we don't need proxies at all. We just always make that decision. Why not do that?
Because different people.
Casey, I think you're the expert now. Pardon?
Am I regretting decisions later on?
Well, you didn't make it. The doctor will just always decide in favor of life. Yep.
Like different people have different needs, like they just might want something different.
How different? Like, explain different. The doctor's just going to do what they think is medically best.
Some people might not want that to happen. Like if they were maybe like brain dead, they might just want to die
Right.
after instead of live for.
Keeping alive the body after you're brain dead might not be what something would want, whereas a doctor would think, well, we got to keep them alive. When we look at decisions that doctors make after the fact and what family makes, because sometimes the people survive, then we can say, well, the doctor ended up having to make the decision because we couldn't contact anybody. How happy are you with the decision? We find that doctors are not as good as relatives. Relatives are far more likely, and of course, your mom and dad. So that's why it's that way in statute law. Yep.
Also, there's like really complicated decisions like in house where it's like, is he cut off his leg or like try to like keep it on? So it's not like always just like black and white. There's always like some other.
There's other criteria. If it's like chop off the leg or remove the hand, and they're a famous violinist, they might take a higher risk to save their hand. So yeah, perfect, good. Enjoy your break. Have fun. Study hard.